Subscribe to Storylab. Now, let's begin this one. The Missouri rain hammered against the windows of Marshall Clayton's small office in the industrial district of Kansas City. At 42, he looked like a man who'd lived twice that long. Not from age, but from experience. The kind that left invisible scars. He sat behind his desk, reviewing contract for his consulting firm, though consulting was a generous term for what amounted to advising small businesses on logistics and security. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that attracted attention. That was exactly how he wanted it. The framed photo on his desk showed a younger Marshall in dress blues, arm around a bright-eyed girl of 7. Joanna. She was 17 now, splitting time between his modest house and her mother's place across town. The custody arrangement had been his idea after the divorce 3 years ago. Miranda had wanted full custody, but Marshall had quietly hired the best attorney money could buy. Not to fight. Fighting drew attention, but to ensure he remained in his daughter's life. The judge had sided with him. Marshall never fought battles he couldn't win. His phone buzzed. A text from Joanna. "Can I stay with you this weekend? Mom's family is having another gathering." He typed back, "Always. Your room is ready." The family gathering will be another Davis clan event. Miranda had gone back to her maiden name after the divorce, reclaiming her identity as a Davis, a name that carried weight in certain circles of Kansas City. Not the good kind of weight. Roger Davis Sr., Miranda's father, ran a successful law firm that specialized in keeping the wrong people out of prison. His 9 sons, Miranda's brothers, were living proof that his skills worked. Marshall had known what he was getting into when he'd married Miranda 14 years ago. Back then, he'd been fresh out of the military, honorably discharged after 10 years with a unit that officially didn't exist. The Black Operations Team had taken him from a scared 21-year-old infantry soldier to something else entirely. Something efficient. Something dangerous. Miranda had been beautiful, charming, and most importantly, unaware of what he'd really done during those 10 years overseas. She believed he was regular Army. Marshall had never corrected her. Their marriage had been good for a while, until Joanna was 6 and Miranda's family started pulling her back into their orbit. The Davis brothers had always treated Marshall like an outsider, a nobody who'd gotten lucky marrying into their family. He'd let them think that. It was safer. The divorce had been inevitable. Miranda chose her family over their marriage, and Marshall wasn't going to force her to choose. But Joanna, that was non-negotiable. His daughter would grow up knowing at least one parent gave a damn about something other than money and reputation. The office door burst open. Marshall's hand instinctively moved toward the drawer where he kept a Glock 19, but he froze when he saw who it was. Joanna. But not the Joanna who'd texted him 10 minutes ago about weekend plans. This Joanna was crawling across his floor, her face streaked with tears and blood, both arms hanging at grotesque angles. Her shirt was torn, her jeans dirty, and her eyes, God, her eyes, held a terror that made Marshall's blood turn to ice. "Dad," she gasped, her voice breaking. Stepmom's brothers, they did this. Marshall was around the desk in a heartbeat, kneeling beside her, his hands hovering over her broken body, afraid to touch her and cause more pain. His training kicked in, assess, stabilize, extract. But this wasn't a mission. This was his daughter. How many? His voice was steady, clinical. The only way he could keep functioning. 9, she sobbed. All of them. 6 hours, Dad. They took turns. Marshall's jaw clenched so hard his teeth should have shattered. Where? Uncle Roger's warehouse. Mom was there. She watched. She didn't stop them. The world tilted. Miranda had watched. His ex-wife, the mother of his child, had stood by while her brothers tortured their daughter for 6 hours. Marshall pulled out his phone, called 911, and gave them the address. Then he carefully, gently, gathered Joanna into his arms, mindful of her injuries, and carried her to his car. As he laid her across the back seat, she grabbed his shirt with her one partially working hand. "Make them pay," she whispered. "Please, Dad." Marshall looked down at his daughter, his smart, kind, beautiful daughter who'd never hurt anyone in her life, and saw the ruins of her innocence in her eyes. "I will," he said quietly. "I promise." The hospital took Joanna immediately. Both arms were broken in multiple places. 3 cracked ribs. Severe bruising across her entire body. The rape kit came back positive. The doctor, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, pulled Marshall aside after the initial examination. "Mr. Clayton, I've been an ER doctor for 26 years. I've seen a lot of abuse cases. This," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "This was systematic, calculated. Whoever did this took their time. They wanted her to suffer." Marshall nodded once. "How long until she recovers?" "Physically, 3 months minimum. Psychologically," the doctor shook her head. "That's going to take a lot longer. We've already called in a trauma counselor. The police are here too. They'll want a statement." The police. Detective Sarah Chun introduced herself, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s who reminded Marshall of some of the intelligence officers he'd worked with overseas. Professional, thorough, but ultimately limited by rules and procedures that didn't apply to the world Marshall used to inhabit. "Your daughter gave us names," Chun said, sitting across from Marshall in a private waiting room. 9 men, the Davis brothers. Roger Jr., Craig, Brian, Garrett, Les, Ron, Corey, Guy, and Adam. She says her mother, Miranda Davis, was present but didn't participate directly. "And what are you going to do about it?" Marshall asked. Chin's expression tightened. "We've issued warrants for all 9 brothers. Miranda Davis is wanted for questioning as an accessory. The problem is the Davis family has resources. Their father, Roger Sr., is already making calls. We'll do everything by the book, Mr. Clayton, but I need you to understand. This is going to be difficult." "Difficult," Marshall repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "The Davis family has money, connections, and the best lawyers in the state. I'm not saying we won't get justice, but it might not be the justice you want. The justice your daughter deserves." Marshall stood. "Thank you, Detective. I appreciate your honesty." Chun stood too, handing him her card. "If you think of anything that might help the case, call me. Day or night." Marshall took the card, knowing he'd never use it. Joanna was admitted overnight for observation. Marshall sat beside her hospital bed, watching her sleep under the heavy influence of painkillers. Her face was still swollen, bruises blooming across her cheeks and jaw. Both arms were casted, suspended slightly to reduce swelling. She looked small, fragile. She'd never been fragile before. Marshall's phone rang. Miranda. He rejected the call. She tried again. He turned the phone off. In the quiet of the hospital room, with only the rhythmic beeping of monitors for company, Marshall Clayton allowed himself to remember who he used to be. Not the quiet consultant, not the divorced dad trying to live a normal life, but the man who'd been sent into the darkest corners of the world to eliminate threats that conventional forces couldn't touch. For 10 years, he'd been part of a unit that answered directly to people whose names never appeared in official documents. They'd operated in 12 countries across 4 continents. Marshall had been one of their best, patient, precise, and utterly without mercy when the mission required it. He'd walked away from that life when Joanna was born because he'd wanted to be a father, not a weapon. But weapons didn't forget how to cut. Marshall pulled out his laptop and navigated to an encrypted email server he hadn't accessed in 3 years. The login still worked. The address book still contained 47 names of people who owed him favors, or who he'd served with, or who understood that sometimes the only response to evil was overwhelming, calculated violence. He typed one email. Short, specific. Target package, 9 subjects. High-value removal. Timeline, 24 hours. Authorization, personal. Attached files contain full dossiers. No traces. No exceptions. He attached files he'd been quietly building for 3 years. Every piece of information on the Davis brothers he'd collected since the divorce. Where they lived. Where they worked. Their routines. Their weaknesses. Marshall had never trusted Miranda's family, and that paranoia had just paid off. Before sending, he added one more line. One to be found. Message delivery required. Then he hit send and shut the laptop. By morning, 9 men would cease to exist, and the Davis family would learn that some fathers were more dangerous than any lawyer. 24 hours earlier, the Davis family compound had been celebrating. Roger Davis Sr. sat at the head of a long table in the main house, a sprawling estate in the wealthy Mission Hills neighborhood. At 73, he was still sharp as a knife, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that made judges defer and prosecutors hesitate. His law firm had made millions keeping Kansas City's elite out of prison. His sons had learned from the best. To family, Roger Sr. raised his glass of scotch. Around the table, his 9 sons raised theirs in response. Miranda sat to his right, looking uncomfortable but staying quiet. She'd always been the smart one, the one who knew when to speak and when to stay silent. To family, the brothers chorused. Roger Jr., the eldest at 44, grinned. He was built like a linebacker, all muscle and arrogance. Dad, we've got the contract signed on the waterfront property. That's $5 million in development rights. Good. Roger Sr. nodded approvingly. What about the zoning issue? Handled, Brian said. At 40, he was the family's fixer, the one who made problems disappear. City council member, I know, owes me a favor. The vote goes our way next week. This was how the Davis family operated. Legal on the surface, corrupt underneath. They owned half the city council, had judges on speed dial, and ran their business empire like a mafia without the Italian accents. Roger Sr. had built it all, and his sons had expanded it. Miranda picked at her food. She'd moved back into the compound after the divorce, taking a small house on the property. It had seemed like the right choice at the time, going home, being with family. But lately, she'd started to remember why she'd left in the first place. Miranda, Roger Sr. said, his tone sharp. You're quiet tonight. Just tired, she said. Tired of what? You don't work. You don't contribute. You just sit in that house we're providing and collect alimony from that nobody you married. Miranda flinched. Her father had never forgiven her for marrying Marshall, a man with no family name, no connections, no power. The fact that Marshall had negotiated a fair custody agreement had only made it worse. Roger Sr. saw it as a loss, and he didn't lose. Speaking of which, Guy, the youngest son at 28, leaned forward. I saw Joanna last week. She's growing up. She's 17, Miranda said quickly, and she's none of your concern. She's family, Roger Sr. corrected. Our family, not that deadbeat's family. Your brothers have been patient, Miranda, but it's time we discussed bringing Joanna into the fold properly. She should know where her loyalties lie. Her loyalties lie with her father, Miranda said, surprising herself with her own firmness. Marshall has been good to her. The table went quiet. Speaking against the family wasn't done. Roger Jr. laughed, breaking the tension. Marshall, the guy couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. What's he do now? Some kind of consultant? Probably makes 50 grand a year. And he thinks he can raise a Davis. He's her father, Miranda repeated, but her voice was smaller now. And we're her family, Roger Sr. said with finality. I think it's time Joanna learned what that means. Real education. Not the soft nonsense Marshall's been feeding her. Miranda felt her stomach turn. She knew what real education meant. She'd grown up with it. The Davis family broke people down and built them back up in their image. It had worked on her brothers, turning them into extensions of their father's will. It had almost worked on her before she'd met Marshall and escaped. But Joanna was still half Marshall's daughter, and that half was the better half. I don't think, Miranda started. You don't need to think, Adam cut in. At 35, he was the family's enforcer, the one who handled physical problems. Roger Jr., and I will talk to the girl. Set her straight about how things work. She's not part of this, Miranda said, louder now. She's a good kid. She gets straight A's. She wants to go to college. Leave her alone. Roger Sr.'s hand came down on the table like a gavel. She's a Davis. She'll do what Davis women do. Support the family. Now, I don't want to hear another word about it. Roger, Adam, you'll handle the girl this weekend. Bring her here. Let her see how real power works. Miranda's blood ran cold. No, absolutely not. It's not your decision, her father said coldly. You gave up decision-making rights when you married that loser and embarrassed this family. You want to stay here? You want the protection of the Davis name? Then you'll fall in line. The brothers were all nodding. Even Corey and Les, the twins who usually stayed neutral, looked convinced. The family had spoken. Joanna would be brought into the fold, willing or not. Miranda excused herself early, walking back to her small house on the property, her mind racing. She should call Marshall, warn him, protect their daughter. But that would mean going against the family. And Roger Sr. had made it clear what happened to people who went against the family. She poured herself a glass of wine and told herself it would be fine. They just talked to Joanna, scare her a little, show her how things worked. Then she'd go back to Marshall's and everything would settle down. Miranda was very good at lying to herself. She'd had years of practice. Saturday morning, Roger Jr. and Adam showed up at Marshall's house. Marshall answered the door in a t-shirt and jeans, looking exactly like what the Davis family thought he was, a middle-aged nobody trying to stay relevant in his daughter's life. Help you? Marshall asked. We're here for Joanna, Roger Jr. said. Family business. She's not your family, Marshall replied calmly. Actually, she is. Adam stepped forward, using his size to intimidate. He was 6'3", 240, all gym muscle and steroids. Her mother's a Davis. That makes her a Davis. We're taking her to the compound for the weekend. Marshall didn't move from the doorway. Joanna's 17. She can make her own choices. Joanna, he called back into the house. Joanna appeared behind him, wearing Marshall's old army hoodie and looking confused. What's going on? Your uncles want you to visit the compound, Marshall said. Joanna's expression closed off. I'm good here, thanks. Wasn't a request, Roger Jr. said, his voice hardening. Your grandfather wants to see you. Then he can come here, Joanna said. I'm not going. Adam's hand shot out, grabbing for Joanna's arm. Marshall's response was instantaneous and precise. A sharp strike to Adam's extended elbow that hyperextended the joint without breaking it, followed by a pivot that put Marshall between Adam and Joanna. Adam stumbled back, clutching his arm, his face twisted in pain and shock. Don't touch my daughter, Marshall said quietly. Now get off my property. Roger Jr.'s face flushed red. You just assaulted a Davis. You have any idea what that means? It means your brother should learn to keep his hands to himself, Marshall replied. Goodbye, gentlemen. He shut the door and locked it. Joanna stared at him. Dad, what just happened? Your uncles forgot their manners, Marshall said. Pack a bag. We're going to stay at a hotel for the weekend. They're going to be pissed. Let them be. But Marshall knew it wouldn't end there. He just humiliated two Davis brothers in front of each other. Men like that didn't forget. Men like that doubled down. He'd started a war. He just didn't know it would involve his daughter. The call came on Sunday afternoon. Roger Sr. himself, not one of the brothers. Marshall, the old lawyer's voice was smooth, practiced. I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. Your sons tried to kidnap my daughter, Marshall said. I'd say we're on exactly the right foot. Kidnap is a strong word. They wanted to invite Joanna to a family gathering. You overreacted. Your son grabbed her. A misunderstanding, Roger Sr. said dismissively. But I'm calling to clear the air. I'd like to meet with you, man to man, discuss Joanna's future. She's at a critical age, Marshall. The choices she makes now will define her life. She's making those choices just fine without your input. Is she? Roger Sr.'s voice took on an edge. Or is she making choices based on limited information? You've kept her isolated from half her family, from opportunities, from her heritage. The Davis name opens doors in this city, doors that a consultant's daughter might not otherwise access. She doesn't need your doors. Everyone needs something. Marshall, even you. I looked into your finances. You're comfortable, but not wealthy. College for Joanna won't be cheap. Medical school, because I know that's what she wants. That's even more expensive. The Davis family could help with that. Full scholarship. No strings. Marshall said nothing. Just meet with me. Roger Sr. pressed. 1 hour. Wednesday noon in my office. Let's discuss this like civilized people. For Joanna's sake. Marshall hung up without responding. But he knew what was coming. The Davis family didn't make offers. They made power plays. Roger Sr. was setting up the board, moving pieces into position. The meeting would be a trap of some kind, an attempt to get leverage. Marshall wouldn't be there, but someone would be watching. He made a call to an old friend, someone who still worked in signals intelligence. I need eyes on location. Wednesday noon. Davis Law Firm, downtown Kansas City. I want to know everyone who enters and leaves that building between 11:30 and 1 o'clock. This official, his friend asked. Personal, Marshall said. Then it'll cost you. Name your price. Wednesday came. Marshall didn't show to the meeting, but his friend delivered. 7 people entered Roger Sr.'s office during that window. 5 are the Davis brothers, Roger Jr., Brian, Garrett, Les, and Ron. 1 was a detective on the Kansas City PD payroll, a dirty cop named Frank Morrison. And 1 was a judge, the Honorable Patricia Wells. They weren't planning to negotiate with Marshall. They were planning to destroy him. The detective would manufacture evidence. The judge would rubber stamp whatever legal action they pursued, and the brothers would handle the physical intimidation. It was a good plan, professional, thorough. It wouldn't save them. Thursday evening, Joanna was supposed to be at a friend's house for a study group. She'd texted Marshall at 5 p.m. to confirm. He'd texted back permission. She never made it. The Davis brothers grabbed her 3 blocks from her friend's house, pulling her into a van. She fought. Marshall had taught her basic self-defense, but 9 against 1 weren't odds anyone could beat. They took her to Roger Jr.'s warehouse in the industrial district, a legitimate business that served as a front for the family's less legitimate operations. The warehouse was soundproofed, private, the perfect place for the Davis family to teach someone a lesson. Miranda was already there when they brought Joanna in. She'd been told they were just going to talk to her daughter, scare her straight. She'd been stupid enough to believe it. What happened next would haunt Miranda for the rest of her life. It started with Roger Jr. slapping Joanna across the face, hard enough to split her lip. You think you're better than us? Your father think he can disrespect this family? Joanna spit blood. He is better than you. That's when they broke her left arm. Adam twisted it until the bones snapped, and Joanna's scream echoed off the warehouse walls. Miranda lurched forward. Stop. Stop. You said you were just going to talk to her. Sit down, Roger Sr. said. He'd arrived 10 minutes into the beating, dressed in his expensive suit, watching with cold calculation. The girl needs to learn respect. She's 17. She's my daughter. She's a Davis who thinks she can refuse the family. That ends now. For 6 hours, they took turns. Not sexual. Roger Sr. drew that line, barely, but violent. Methodical. Each brother participated, some more enthusiastically than others. They broke her right arm, cracked her ribs, beat her until she couldn't scream anymore, until she could only whimper. Miranda watched it all, frozen in horror and cowardice. She told herself if she intervened, they'd hurt her too. She told herself Joanna would be fine, would heal, would learn her lesson. She told herself anything to avoid admitting that she was watching her daughter be tortured and doing nothing to stop it. When it was finally over, Joanna lay on the concrete floor, barely conscious, both arms useless, her body one massive bruise. Take her somewhere public, Roger Sr. said to his sons. Leave her where she'll be found. And make sure she knows, next time she disrespects this family, next time her father disrespects this family, it'll be worse. They dumped her 3 blocks from Marshall's office and drove away. Somehow, Joanna crawled. 3 blocks on her belly, both arms screaming agony, ribs grinding with every breath. But she crawled, because her father had taught her that you never give up. You never stop fighting. You survive, and then you make them pay. When she finally reached Marshall's office, and he saw what they'd done to his daughter, Marshall Clayton stopped being a consultant. He stopped being a divorced dad trying to live quietly. He became what he'd been trained to be, a weapon. The hospital had Joanna for observation. Marshall sat in his office, the door locked, his computer screen glowing in the darkness. The encrypted email had been sent hours ago. Responses were already coming in. Package received. Assets deploying. Timeline confirmed. UC. Green light on all targets. Zero trace. Protocol engaged. Sierra, you sure about this, brother? No going back. Nomad. Marshall typed one response to all of them. I'm sure. His phone buzzed. Miranda. He'd been ignoring her calls for hours, but this time he answered. Marshall, please. We need to talk. You watched, Marshall said quietly. Joanna told me. You stood there and watched your brothers torture our daughter for 6 hours. Miranda's sob came through the line. I didn't know they were going to. I thought they were just going to scare her. You watched, Marshall repeated. You could have called the police. You could have called me. You could have done anything. But you stood there and watched. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, please. Your brothers hurt my daughter, Marshall said, and his voice had gone flat, emotionless. The tone he used to use before missions. They're going to pay for that. And so are you. Marshall, don't. My father, he'll destroy you. You have to understand. No, Marshall said. You have to understand. I try to live a quiet life. I try to be a good father. I try to put my past behind me. But your family wouldn't let me. So now they get to meet the man I used to be. What are you talking about? You'll see. Give it about 12 hours. He hung up. Miranda immediately called her father. Roger Sr. listened to her panic, then laughed. The consultant is going to do what? Exactly? File a lawsuit? The police won't touch us. I've already made sure of that. Detective Morrison is handling the investigation, and he's going to conclude there's insufficient evidence. Judge Wells will dismiss any civil action. Marshall Clayton is nobody. He has no power here. He sounded different, Miranda said. Like he wasn't afraid. Because he's stupid, Roger Sr. said dismissively. Don't worry about it. I'll have Morrison pick him up tomorrow for questioning. Probably slap him with an obstruction charge. That should remind him of his place. But Roger Sr. was wrong. Marshall Clayton had power. It just wasn't the kind that appeared in courtrooms or city council chambers. It was the kind that operated in the dark. The kind that made people disappear. Les Davis was the first. He lived alone in a condo downtown. The bachelor lifestyle funded by the family business. At 2 a.m., he was sleeping when his door opened silently. Two figures entered, moving with professional precision. Les never woke up. One moment he was dreaming, the next he was gone. His neighbors wouldn't notice he was missing until the smell started, 3 weeks later. By then, his body would be in a barrel at the bottom of Table Rock Lake, weighed down with cement. Ron Davis was second. He was driving home from a bar, drunk, when his car simply veered off the road into a concrete barrier. The airbag didn't deploy. Someone had disabled it hours earlier. The impact killed him instantly. Police would rule it a DUI fatality. Case closed. Corey Davis was third. He disappeared from his own house, his wife reporting him missing the next morning. Police would search for weeks. They'd find nothing. Corey was already on a private plane to a black site in Eastern Europe, where he'd spend the rest of his short life answering questions about the Davis family's criminal operations before being disposed of quietly. Guy Davis was fourth. He was jogging on a trail when he collapsed, clutching his chest. Heart attack, the paramedics would say. Tragic for a man of 28. The autopsy would show cardiac arrest. What it wouldn't show was the air bubble injected into his bloodstream an hour earlier, a technique that left no trace. Brian Davis was fifth. The fixer disappeared while fixing a problem. He'd been meeting with a city councilman at a construction site, late at night, when he'd simply vanished. The councilman swore he'd turned around and Brian was gone. Police would suspect the councilman of murder, investigate him for months, find nothing. Brian was in pieces, scattered across 3 different landfills in 2 states. Garrett Davis was sixth. He never made it home from the gym. His car was found abandoned, engines still running, doors open, no sign of struggle. Police would classify it as a missing person case. Garrett was feeding fish in the Missouri River, his body weighted down with his own gym equipment. Adam Davis was seventh. The enforcer put up a fight. He was big, strong, trained, but he was up against professionals who'd fought in war zones. They took him at his apartment, subdued him with a taser, and disappeared him into the night. Adam ended up in a medical research facility that didn't ask questions about cadaver sources. Science would benefit from his donation. Craig Davis was eighth. He knew something was wrong when 4 of his brothers went missing in one night. He called his father, demanded protection. Roger Sr. put him in a safe house with private security. It didn't matter. The team that took Craig went through the security like they weren't there, because they trained most of those security guards years ago. Craig vanished without a shot fired. Roger Davis Jr. was ninth. He was the message. Marshall had specified. One to be found. Roger Jr. was the eldest. The heir. The one who'd slapped Joanna first. They took him last, made it slow, and left him in his own bed in his penthouse apartment. When police entered 48 hours later, responding to a welfare check, they found Roger Jr. dead from what appeared to be a heroin overdose. Needles still in his arm. Roger Jr. didn't use drugs. Everyone knew that, but the tox screen didn't lie. What the tox screen didn't show was that he'd been injected with a paralytic first, kept conscious while his heart slowly stopped, unable to move or scream. The heroin was postmortem. A gift. A message. This is what happens when you hurt a father's daughter. 24 hours after Marshall sent his email, 9 men were gone. 8 vanished without a trace. 1 found dead in suspicious circumstances that police couldn't quite prove weren't accidental. The Davis family empire collapsed overnight. Roger Sr. received the first call at 6 a.m. Les hadn't shown up for a meeting. Then Ron's wife called. Her husband had died in a car crash. Then Corey's wife. Then Guy's girlfriend. Then Brian's business partner. Then Garrett's gym reported his car abandoned. By noon, Roger Sr. knew. All his sons. All gone. He called the police commissioner, someone who owed the Davis family favors. I need every resource on this. My sons are missing or dead. I'm sorry, Roger, but we have to follow procedure. We'll file the missing person reports, investigate Ron's death as a DUI. This wasn't an accident. Someone took my boys. Do you have evidence of that? Witnesses? Anything concrete? Roger Sr. had nothing but his certainty. And certainty didn't matter in a court of law. He called Detective Morrison. You need to arrest Marshall Clayton. Now. On what charge? He killed my sons. Do you have proof? I don't need proof. You work for me. Arrest him. Mr. Davis, Morrison said carefully, I'm happy to question him, but I can't make an arrest without probable cause. And right now, there's no evidence connecting him to anything. Most of your sons are just missing. 1 died in a car accident. 1 from a parent overdose. There's no pattern here that suggests murder. Roger Sr. slammed the phone down and called Judge Wells. Patricia, I need an emergency order. Full protective custody for my family. And I need you to issue a warrant for Marshall Clayton's arrest. Roger, I can't just issue warrants because you're upset. My sons are dead. I'm sorry for your loss. Wells said, and she did sound genuinely sorry. But I need evidence for a warrant. Give me something. Anything. Roger Sr. had nothing. That's when Miranda called, screaming. They're gone. All of them. Roger, Brian, all my brothers, they're gone. Marshall did this. How do you know it was Marshall? Who else would it be? Do you have proof? I don't need proof. I know. Roger Sr. heard his daughter's hysteria and recognized it as his own. The Davis family was used to winning through power, through intimidation, through corruption. But this was different. This was someone operating outside the system they controlled. He called his best investigator, a former FBI agent who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. I need you to dig into Marshall Clayton. Everything. Background, service record, associations, everything. The investigator called back 3 hours later. Mr. Davis, you need to drop this. What? Marshall Clayton. His military service. It's heavily redacted. Like, classified at levels I've never seen. I reached out to some contacts, and the response I got was basically stop looking. What does that mean? It means whoever this guy is, he's connected to people you don't want to fuck with. Pardon my language. I don't care who he's connected to. He killed my sons. Maybe, the investigator said. But you won't prove it. And if you keep pushing, you might end up like them. Roger Sr. fired him and called his lawyer friend at the Justice Department. That call went worse. Roger, I can't help you with this. Why not? Because I made some inquiries about Marshall Clayton and got a very polite but very firm call from someone at the Pentagon telling me to cease and desist immediately. Whoever your ex-son-in-law is, he's protected. Protected by who? By people who outrank me, you, and everyone we know. Let it go. Roger Sr. wouldn't let it go. He was a Davis. The Davis family didn't lose. He called a press conference. My sons have been murdered, he told the assembled reporters. 9 young men, pillars of the community, taken from us by a single individual, Marshall Clayton. I'm calling on the police, the FBI, anyone with authority to investigate this man. He is dangerous. He is connected, and he is getting away with murder. The press conference aired on local news. It made some headlines. Then it disappeared as bigger stories took over. No law enforcement agency opened an investigation. The FBI declined to comment. The police said they were following leads, but had no suspects. Marshall Clayton's name appeared in a few articles, but always with the caveat that he'd made no statement and had not been charged with anything. Roger Sr. tried to sue him civilly. Judge Wells, after initially agreeing to hear the case, suddenly recused herself. The case was assigned to a federal judge who dismissed it for lack of evidence before it even got to discovery. The Davis family was being shut out of their own system. Roger Sr. finally understood what he was up against. This wasn't a man. This was a ghost. Someone who existed in the spaces between laws, who had friends in places where the Davis family's power meant nothing. Someone who'd been given permission to do what he'd done. Or worse, someone who'd never needed permission in the first place. Miranda showed up at Marshall's house 2 weeks after her brothers disappeared. Marshall answered the door. He looked the same as always, calm, quiet, unremarkable. But Miranda could see something different in his eyes now. Something cold. "Can I see her?" Miranda asked. "Please. I just want to see Joanna." "No," Marshall said. "She's my daughter. You lost that right when you watch her being tortured." Miranda's face crumpled. I know what I did. I'll never forgive myself. But please, Marshall, let me apologize to her." "She doesn't want to see you," Marshall said. I asked. She was very clear. "My brothers are gone," Miranda said, her voice breaking. "All of them. My father says you did it. Your father says a lot of things." "Did you?" Marshall looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know what you're talking about." According to police reports, Ron died in a drunk driving accident. Roger died of a drug overdose. The others are missing. Tragic, but not uncommon in families involved in criminal enterprises. "We're not." "You are," Marshall interrupted. "The Davis family has been running illegal operations for decades. Your father's firm exists to keep criminals out of prison. Your brothers were enforcers, fixers, and thugs. You all knew it. You all benefited from it. And you're what? Some kind of vigilante. I'm a father who protected his daughter." Miranda's laugh was bitter. "By making 9 people disappear? By killing my brothers?" "I didn't kill anyone," Marshall said calmly. "But let's say, hypothetically, someone did. Let's say someone out there has the skills and connections to make people vanish. Would that person be wrong?" 9 men tortured a 17-year-old girl for 6 hours. They broke her arms, cracked her ribs, beat her until she could barely breathe, and her mother watched. "I didn't know they were going to." "You watched," Marshall said, and the coldness in his voice made Miranda step back. "You stood there and watched your daughter suffer, and you did nothing. You're as guilty as they are. Then why am I still alive?" Miranda whispered. "If you're so powerful, if you can make my brothers vanish, why not me too?" Marshall's expression didn't change. "Joanna asked me not to. She said you're still her mother, even if you failed her. She has more compassion in her broken body than your entire family had in 9 men combined." Miranda started crying. "Go home," Marshall said. "Back to your father's compound. Lock your doors. And pray you never give me a reason to change my mind about honoring my daughter's request." He closed the door. Miranda stood there for a long moment, then walked back to her car. As she drove away, she saw him watching from the window, and she knew with absolute certainty that he could end her life with a phone call. But he wouldn't, because Joanna had saved her, and that made it so much worse. Roger Sr. tried one last gambit. He hired a team of mercenaries, former special forces, the kind of men who'd operated in the same shadows Marshall had. He gave them one mission: find evidence that Marshall Clayton was responsible for his son's deaths. Or failing that, make Marshall confess. The team leader was a man named Viktor Kozlov, ex-Russian Spetsnaz, who'd built a reputation as someone who could find anyone, break anyone. Kozlov and his team of 6 watched Marshall for a week. They photographed him, followed him, tapped his phones. They found nothing unusual, just a quiet consultant who visited his daughter in the hospital every day. On day 8, Kozlov received a phone call from an unknown number. "Leave Kansas City," the voice said. No accent, no inflection, pure professionalism. "Who is this?" Kozlov demanded. "Someone who knows you were hired to target Marshall Clayton." Someone who's telling you that's a very bad idea. Are you Clayton? No. I'm the person who'd have to clean up after Clayton kills you and your entire team. And I'd really rather not do that paperwork. You think he can take us? 6 trained operators. Victor, the voice said, and Kozlov felt a chill because they knew his name. Marshal Clayton killed 47 people in Yemen during a single 26-hour operation. He infiltrated a cartel compound in Colombia and eliminated 22 targets without firing a shot. He's been awarded medals that don't officially exist for operations that never happened. If he wants you dead, you're dead. The only question is whether you make it quick or slow. If he's so dangerous, why isn't he still in the military? Because he retired. Because he wanted to be a father. But you and Roger Davis just reminded him why he was so good at his other job. The line went dead. Kozlov looked at his team. 6 trained killers. Men he'd trust with his life. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that they were outmatched. He called Roger Sr. We're done. Find someone else. I'm paying you $500,000. Keep your money. And my advice? Let this go. Your sons are gone. Your family's finished. Take what you have left and disappear before Clayton decides you're not worth leaving alive. Kozlov and his team were on a plane out of Kansas City within 6 hours. Roger Sr. sat in his office, alone, his empire crumbling around him. His sons were dead or missing. His daughter wouldn't speak to him. His investigators had quit. His mercenaries had fled. And the one man he wanted to destroy was untouchable. For the first time in his 73 years, Roger Davis Sr. felt powerless. And Marshal Clayton hadn't even acknowledged his existence. 3 months later, Joanna came home. Her arms had healed. The casts were off. Physical therapy was ongoing, but she had full range of motion back. The bruises had faded, but the scars, the invisible ones, would take longer. Marshall had converted the garage into a training room. Punching bags, weights, mats. He'd started teaching her what he knew. Not the killing. He'd never teach her that, but the defense. The confidence. The control. Again, he said as she worked through a defensive sequence. Joanna moved through it, blocking imaginary strikes, countering. Her form was good. Her speed improving. Better, Marshall said. You're getting stronger. I don't feel strong, Joanna said, pausing to catch her breath. I still have nightmares. That's normal. How did you deal with it? After what you did. In the military. Marshall was quiet for a moment. He'd never told Joanna details about his service. But she deserved to know now. She'd earned the truth. I didn't deal with it well, he admitted. For a long time, I didn't deal with it at all. I just buried it. Pretended it didn't happen. That's why I left. That's why I wanted a normal life with you. Because I thought I could just turn it off. But you couldn't. No. When someone threatens someone you love, all that training, all that experience, it comes back. Like muscle memory. Do you regret it? Joanna asked. What you did to them? Marshall looked at his daughter. At 17, she was asking him if he regretted making 9 men disappear for torturing her. No, he said honestly. I don't. They hurt you. They deserved what happened. Even though it was illegal, laws are made by people, Marshall said. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they protect the guilty and punish the innocent. Your mother's family-owned judges, police, lawyers. They would have walked away, maybe paid a fine, maybe served minimal time, but they wouldn't have paid the price they deserved. So you became judge, jury, and executioner? Yes. Joanna considered this. I'm glad you did, she said quietly. Is that wrong? I'm glad they're dead. No, Marshall said. It makes you human. They trained for another hour. Then Marshall made dinner. Pasta, Joanna's favorite. They ate together, talking about college applications and her upcoming senior year. Normal things. Father-daughter things. Later, as Joanna went to bed, she hugged Marshall tight. I love you, Dad. I love you too, kiddo. Thank you for protecting me. Always, Marshall said. Always. After she went upstairs, Marshall sat in his living room, looking at the photo on the mantel. Him and Joanna, years ago, before everything went wrong. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Clean sweep. No traces. You're clear. Marshall deleted the message and turned off his phone. The Davis family was finished. Roger Sr. was under investigation for tax fraud. Convenient timing. Miranda had moved out of state. Trying to start over somewhere her name didn't carry weight. The family business was being dismantled by federal prosecutors. And 9 men who'd tortured an innocent girl were gone. Justice, Marshall thought, didn't always come from courtrooms. Sometimes it came from the dark. Sometimes it came from fathers who refused to let their daughters suffer. And sometimes it came with a single email and 24 hours of professional violence. Marshall stood up, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow he had a consultation meeting for his business. Back to being boring Marshall Clayton, the quiet consultant nobody noticed. The weapon was back in its sheath. But now everyone knew it was there. And that was message enough. Epilogue. 6 months later. Joanna Clayton stood on the stage at her high school graduation, valedictorian, giving her speech to assembled parents and students. Marshall sat in the front row, watching her with quiet pride. She'd healed. Not completely, probably never completely, but enough. She was strong again. Smart. Confident. And she'd gotten into Johns Hopkins for pre-med. Full scholarship. Not from the Davis family. They had nothing left to give. But from a foundation Marshall had never heard of that had somehow found her application and deemed her worthy. Marshall suspected he knew where the money really came from. The same people who'd helped him when he needed it. The ones who understood that sometimes the world needed operators like him. After the ceremony, Joanna found him in the crowd. "Did you see?" she said, waving her acceptance letter. "Full ride. Books, housing, everything. I'm so proud of you," Marshall said, hugging her. "I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to help people." "You already do," Marshall said. They walked to the parking lot together. As they reached Marshall's car, a black sedan pulled up. The window rolled down. A man Marshall recognized, someone from his old unit, someone he'd worked with in 3 different countries, nodded at him. "Clayton." "Jackson. Heard you had some trouble a while back." "It's handled." Jackson smiled. "Yeah, I heard that too. Clean work. Professional." Some of the guys were impressed. "Just protecting my family." "That's what we do," Jackson said. Then he looked at Joanna. "You should be proud of your dad. He's one of the best." "I know," Joanna said. Jackson's expression turned serious. Word to the wise, Roger Davis Sr. is still making noise. He hired another investigator last month. This one's former CIA, guy named Patterson. Just FYI. Marshall's expression didn't change. "Thanks for the heads up. Want you to handle it?" "No, I'll take care of it." Jackson nodded and drove away. Joanna looked at her father. "Are we going to have to leave? Go into hiding?" "No," Marshall said. "We're not going anywhere. You're going to Hopkins. You're going to become a doctor. You're going to have the life you deserve. And if this Patterson guy finds something," Marshall opened the car door for her. "He won't. And if he tries to become a problem, he'll learn the same lesson the others did. Which is that some fathers," Marshall said, starting the car, "are more dangerous than anyone realizes. And you don't threaten their children." They drove home. That evening, Marshall made one more encrypted email. Short. Simple. "Patterson. Background check needed. Potential problem. Recommendations?" The response came 30 minutes later, already handled. "He withdrew from the Davis contract this morning. Cited conflict of interest. You're clear." Marshall smiled. His old network was still looking out for him. He deleted the emails and went upstairs where Joanna was studying for her final exams. She looked up when he knocked. "Hey, Dad. Hey, kiddo. You good?" "Yeah," she said. "I'm good. We're good." Marshall nodded. "We are." And they were. Roger Davis Sr. died of a stroke 2 weeks later. Natural causes, the doctors said. The stress of losing his sons, his business, his empire. It happened. Miranda sent flowers to the funeral. Marshall didn't acknowledge them. The Davis family name faded from Kansas City's power structure. The compound was sold. The law firm was dissolved. The corruption investigations led to 7 other families, but the Davis family had been the keystone. Without them, the whole corrupt structure collapsed. Justice came slowly, sometimes, but it came. And Marshall Clayton went back to being nobody. A consultant, a father, a man who lived quietly and bothered no one. But in certain circles, in the dark places where professionals operated, his name carried weight. Marshall Clayton, The man who'd made 9 armed men vanish in 24 hours. The man who'd taken on a corrupt family and won. The man who proved that you could leave the life, but the life never left you. And every father who heard the story, every father with a daughter, understood. You protect your own, no matter what it takes, no matter what it costs, no matter who you used to be. The weapon might be sheathed, but it never rusted. And woe to anyone who forced it to be drawn. Marshall Clayton had learned that lesson in 12 countries over 10 years. The Davis family had learned it in one night. And Joanna Clayton, future doctor, future healer, carried that knowledge with her. That her father, quiet, boring, consultant Marshall Clayton, had once been something else. Something deadly. Something necessary. Something that protected her when the world proved cruel. She'd never need to know the details. She'd never need to see that side of him again. But she'd always know it was there. And that was enough. They were safe. They were together. And they were free. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen.